A very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Ashish, and you're watching the series of Bipan Chandra's India's Struggle for Independence. And we are on the seventh chapter now. The chapter talks about the economic critique of British imperialism. Britishers have now begun to feel the heat, and Indians have begun their anti colonial struggle. This is what the chapter tells us about. It tells us that for the first time, Indians were expressing their desire to self rule. And for a very first time, Britishers were questioned on their economic policies. Dear friends, this was indeed the first expression of imagining the country or imagining a nation for which you want to fight for. The chapter indeed is a very beautiful chapter and is one of the most authoritative works of Professor Bipin Chandra. This chapter is indeed written by himself, that is Bipin Chandra sir, and it in a way weaves a story. It's actually, this book is all about stories. It tells you stories with hard facts. So here also in this presentation, we'll tell you a story of India's deprivation, of India's degradation economically, how this country was impoverished, how this country was made to feel subjugated by the Britishers economically. So there is a slight difference with what we see in the political history chapters. This is more of an economic history of British India. So get ready for this very interesting part of the lecture, which we'll figure it in around 30 minutes or so. Now, when you look about this chapter in the very first pages, Bipin Chandra explains that what were the stages of economic exploitation that the Britishers had in India for all of their rules. And these stages are actually tough to decode. Actually, what used to happen, that colonial rule had to be called out, that the political effect was very apparent to see. Britishers were fighting left and right. They were fighting with the Mughals, they were fighting with the Marathas, they were fighting with the Mysoreans, they were fighting with in Plassey or in Buxar. And you could see with your own eyes, like this painting shows here, that Shah Alam was granting the Diwani rights to the British East India Company. The cost of defeat is there to see in front of you, right? The cost of defeat is also Rajas being deposed. Rajas made to sign, or Indian princes made to sign subsidiary alliance treaties. These are the naked truth that you have to confront once you are defeated from the Britishers. But economic deprivations or economic colonialism is not very apparent to be seen from the common eyes. This is what he says in this chapter, and it is indeed very interesting to note that. Now, what is this economic deprivation? Basically, you had to understand the nature of the colonial rule in terms of three stages. Bipin Chandra says that there were three stages, or he borrows these analogies from Romesh Chandra Datta's book, The Economic History of India. Now he says that the earliest time period, that is from 1740s to 1813, 1813, was the time period when India was under direct plunder. Britishers were looting India directly because Britishers were defeating Indian kings one by one. The second stage, he says, was the time period from 1813 onwards, going up till the time period of 1857-58, when India came under the pretext of, if I would say, fair trade. India was becoming a market for the British goods. Not only East India Company, but other companies from Britain were also coming into India and trading and setting shops here. That was the second stage. This stage was the stage of free trade, apparently. Free trade not for Indians, but free trade for all the merchants coming from Britain to set up their shops in India. And the third stage, he says, is the period of finance imperialism. That is, from 1858 to 1947. This is the time when India is totally under the subjugation of British rule, and Britishers are extracting Indian revenue by forwarding loans. You give somebody some loan, that person is not able to pay you back, so you just keep taking interest throughout their life terms. Keep putting up the principal amount on their head, and at the end of the day, take all of their resources. This is what debt trap diplomacy nowadays China does, right? We have seen what China is doing with respect to Sri Lanka or Pakistan by giving them huge debts. And if they're unable to, repay the loans back, their properties are being taken away, right? Their national properties are being held mortgaged by China. So something which Britishers already did with Indians. Now, these three stages are a bit tough, or were also a bit tough for Indians to understand. Even students who are preparing for UPSC, they also seem to, not get the subtle differences between the three stages of economic colonialism. But this is what Bipan Chandra says, that it's very easy to understand once you have the realization of it. As I said political subjugation is very easy to see. You can see here in the paintings that Rajas are given, or they are granting away their rights to the Britishers. But in pictures like these, you understand that it was the slow process through which India's economic health was taken for granted, India's economic health was compromised, and Indians were made subsequent servants to the Gora Sahibs, or the white man. And this was very beautifully covered in the garb of a white man's burden, the famous couplet of Rudyard Kipling. But anyways, look at the territory through which the Britishers were fighting, and they were fighting, as I said, left and right. They were fighting in Plassey in 1757. They were fighting in Buxar in 1764. With the war of Buxar, they were able to subjugate even the Mughal princes or even the Mughal rulers. Or they fought with Anglo-Mysore wars, or they fought with Mysoreans, that is Tipu Sultan and before him Hyder Ali. From 1767, in the series of 4 wars. So from 1767, they again fought in 1780, 84. They again fought in 1792 and 1799. So a series of 4 wars from 1767 to 1799. Or they fought with Marathas, 1775, and that was a series of basically 3 wars, 1802, and then finally 1818. So 3 wars with the Marathas from 1775 to 1818. With Punjab, after the death of Maharaja Ranjit Singh in 1839, the Britishers fought 2 wars, 1846 and 1849. Punjab was subjugated. See, this is the spectre of political subjugation. You can see it with your eyes, right? You can see kings getting deposed. But that is the question, how will you see economic colonization? It is not possible to see economic colonization until and unless it stares back at your face in a very stark way. Until and unless your homes are empty of the grains. Until and unless your pockets are empty of the silver trinkets it's supposed to have, that is coins it's supposed to have. You don't see it, you don't feel it. You feel it after 2 or 3 generations. Now that is to be understood by this intricate mechanism, how India was colonized and how India was milked for the profit of Britain. Now, if you're here, you are seeing the map of India with China and Britain out there at that point of time. In a very simple way, if I would, just show you, India would most of the time supply raw materials to Britain. And these raw materials were in the form of raw cotton, silk, porcelain. Of course, porcelain was sourced from China and then given to Britishers. Tea. Tea was a product which was coming from China to India, in the lieu of which India used to supply opium. See, opium, as a product was counterbanned in China, but Indians used to grow opium, and that was forcibly given to the Chinese as a contraband item. Huge profits were raked from it, and those profits were used in return to buy tea from China. In India, the plantation of tea started only after the Opium Wars. So it was after 1840s that the plantation of tea started in India, going to the Great Britain, and of course saltpeter, one of the most important ingredients in gunpowder, and indigo, of course, not to forget spices, range of spices. These were by far the most important products that India used to send. But what British or Britain used to send were the finished products. Most of the time, India got finished products from the side of Britain. And those finished products were most often in the form of textiles. The finished textile, the finished goods, the finished cloth that we wear. And these were machine-made textiles. These were not those textiles which were handcrafted. Huge number of productions at a very cheap rate, at a very fast rate. Indian markets were flooded with the textiles made by Britishers, with the cotton cloth made by the Britishers or silk cloth made by the Britishers at a very fast rate, at a very cheap rate because they were machine made. And Indian markets got flooded. Now, this was the intricate process through which India was robbed of its wealth. And we shall explain you in a systematic way how it happened. Now, before even I do that, it's my humble request, and it's important for you to be remembered, that we are starting our batches, that is our P2I batches, prelims to interview batches, with a surety and a guarantee that your preparation will be taken care by us from prelims till interview. So that after crossing the stage of prelims, you will be invited when you cross the stage of prelims and you have your name in the prelims list, you will be invited again to join us for our mains residential program. We'll be teaching you for prelims on an online mode, but when you clear prelims, we'll again call you back to our campuses in Delhi in the mains residential program. And everything all at this cost, provided you use the code ASHLIVE. When you use the code ASHLIVE, you are able to take the most discount available for this valuable product. Understand, my dear friends, the game for UPSC is not just prelims. Most of the classes function on luring students on just the pretext that you will clear prelims. No doubt prelims is one of the most toughest barriers of the examinations. But remember that you become an IAS or an IPS or an IFS on the basis of your mains marks, not your prelims marks, on the basis of your interview marks. So what about the preparations of those stages? You have to do those preparations diligently and in a very resourceful manner. We know that capital is very far. Maybe you're seeing us from every nook and corner of the country. We don't want the barrier of distance between us to become a barrier of opportunity for you. Use this opportunity in most senses. As I'm saying you, this cost actually is nothing. When you clear your prelims, at this cost, you will be provided lodging, boarding, staying at our campuses so that you can come with us. Study hard for 4 rigorous months. Give your best in the mains. Understand that the mains has answer writing series. It gives you notes. It gives you current affair notes. The program gives you mentors. Every dedicated student, every student has got a dedicated mentor. Not just that, teachers, faculties are always there with you in touch. I'll be there with you in touch as far as histories are concerned. You'll be getting your history lessons from me. Now, with all of this package for you, with all of this opportunity waiting for you, don't you wait to start preparing. You are doing this series, I know, diligently. Most of you whom are saying are diligent students, I know that, and I'm very thankful to all of you. At the same point of time, spread the word. Make sure that you use this opportunity to the best. Don't wait for anyone else. Don't wait for anything else. Use this opportunity, enroll in our courses. Use the code ASHLIVE for all the courses. Even if you want to join for our optional series, you're more than welcome to do so. Okay. So moving ahead, as I told you, I will explain you in some ways how India was economically made a colony. Now, there are some characters in the story who taught us. See, they were the real teachers. The best thing about, and as it is quoted even in the chapter, that the best thing about these early nationalists, that they were not just practicing nationalists, they were also very good teachers. That it taught us that, look, you are being economically taken advantage for. And how? Dadabhai Naoroji said in a very simple and a very apt statement. He said that there is a saying in India, pay strike on the back. Fine, if somebody gives me a blow, if somebody, punishes me with a lathi, maybe it may come on my back. That is fine. If somebody punishes me on my belly, that is not fine. Don't pray a strike on your belly. That is not desired for. Indians were having a strike on their back by political subjugation. They were also having a strike on their belly by economic one. Second is Romesh Chandra Dutt, R.C. Dutt, a very important academician, and you can also say freedom fighter. And he made sure to write for us a book called Economic History of India, a very important seminal book made out during the time of partition of Bengal itself for all of the Indians to read. And then you have Gopal Krishna Gokhale, who stood in the Legislative Assembly for the first time and told Britishers what was their nuisance about. He told in no uncertain terms, or he explained to Britishers in no uncertain terms, that India is being robbed of its wealth. Who else other than Gopal Krishna Gokhale would have even dared to speak truth to the power? Now, these are some of our characters that we'll be dealing in our story of economic subjugation. There are three important ways through which India was plundered. And this is what the chapter tells us about. The first most important way was free trade. As we have seen in the first three stages, as I told you, free trade in India became an important name and became an important way from 1813 onwards, through which India was also being robbed. The second was coming up of foreign capital, finance imperialism, giving out loans, but giving foreign loans. And the third, the most important and the interesting and most known aspect, was the drain of wealth, given famously by Dadabhai Naoroji. But there are other, as I told you, people in the character or people in the story who will also learn about. Now, let us first see about the free trade, that how free trade was plundering India. See, from 1740s till 1813, when number of wars were going on, and particularly with the coming up of Charter Act of 1813, the monopoly of East India Company ended in India, right? This is what has been written, that the trade monopoly of East India Company ended. Howsoever, East India Company was allowed to retain the territorial possession of India, okay? So territory was there for them to man, but now East India Company was not the only company that would have a monopoly. That means what? All the other companies from Britain can come to India and trade. So India will become a what? India will become a market. Now, I'm sure that you are seeing this a recorded session, but in my classes, I get a lot of doubts. As far as this date is concerned, I often tell my history students or students who come up to me regarding history, I often tell them not to worry about dates. See, charter acts were passed every 20 years. That is, from 1773, the Charter Act started being passed, and every 20 years it was passing, right? So 1793 or 1813 or 1833 or 1853. So you don't need to remember this date. But actually at this point of time, that is in 1813, something very important was going on. Industrialization was going on in Great Britain. Britain was the first industrialized nation in the world. And throughout the 18th century or the mid 18th century, that is from 1750s till 1850s, England was having a lot of machine-made products. Now, this was precisely this time when England needed a market for those products. And what better market can you get other than the populous country of India? Even today, India is a heaven for consumer products, right? Any kind of consumer products, even if made in a traditional way, is a very fast, rapidly growing industry in India. Those who are studying economics will know that FMCG industries are the most growing industries annually in India. So this is what was going on. India was becoming a market for all the textile products that industrialization had produced in Great Britain. That is the reason that you have this Charter Act ending the monopoly of East India Company in India. The other most important thing, laissez-faire policy was initiated. Laissez-faire means free trade, everybody, for everyone. So that is the thing. And India became a market. So we have established that. But understand the relationship between India and Britain. And this relationship I have already told you. I hope everything is clear by now, but I will just repeat it for the sake of understanding. India was a colony. Britain was a metropole. So the colony will export raw products. Metropole, that is Britain, will send finished products. That means we will send them raw cotton. We will send them raw silk. They will give us finished shirts, cloth, other products. So you might say that how are we losing? We must be getting money for our exports, right? That is the catch here. Indians never got their say in deciding the price of the raw products. Do you think Indian farmers will be given the true price of their cotton? Indian farmers will be given true price of their indigo. Indian farmers will be given true price of their opium or silk. There was nothing true or there was nothing just that happened with the Indian farmers. Everything that happened to them was unjust during the British rule. They were forcibly made to produce these crops and their prices were kept artificially low. That is the simple reason, or that is the only reason how India was impoverished, how India was economically subjugated. Now this has to be explained. This doesn't come to our eyes as easily as any war or any other exploitation. Now, the other important way through which India was exploited economically was foreign capital. In a very simple understanding, R.C. Dutt said in his book that if India is poor today, it is because of operations of economic causes. He was talking about at that point of India. So what is there? See, poverty was a big issue there. When we were doing the chapter on socio-religious reform movements, I told you that Swami Vivekananda was more concerned with material poverty of Indians rather than spiritual richness. He was all right about the spiritual richness of Indians, and he said that, look, East has spiritual richness, but the West has made material progress. And this is what export and import works. And this is how it works. We can export them spirituality, they can export to us their material development. We shall have a balance between East and the Western part of the world. Now, poverty was a major issue among the Indian nationalists. And the main cause of Indian poverty was seen as the existence of British rule, as simple as that. But how so? How do we explain that? You explain that with foreign capital. R.C. Dutt said that it was the influx of foreign capital. Why? Huge investments, for example, foreign capitals were coming. That means Britishers were investing in India. Why so? What the hell? Why are Britishers investing in India? So look at here at this example that Britishers were making huge investments in India after 1813. Particularly an example is given, and that is of the railways, right? That for the manufacture or for the establishment of railway lines, huge timber had to be cut, huge investments had to be made, iron industries had to be rolled up, And for that, you needed, huge capital. Who was providing that huge capital? Mainly the shareholders of the East India Company, who were now banned to have a monopoly trade in India. They were only providing us the loans. So the question is, why were they providing loans? The answer is simple. These loans had huge interest rates. For example, today Government of India takes loans. Most of the time these are sovereign loans, and the loans don't cross the interest rate of 2 to 3 to 4%. Maximum it goes there, because these are very high amount loans, and these are done at the government level. So the loans taken from one sovereign to the other sovereign comes at a very cheap rate. For example, worldwide, Japan is known for giving the cheapest loans available, right? The ADB Bank, the Asian Development Bank, backed mostly by the Japanese, has most of low rate loans available to the market. But the British East India Company, when it forwarded loans to Indians for building railways, they were huge ticket loans. More than 10 to 12% was the loans interest rate. And not just that, those loans were offered over and above the dividends. Remember, East India Company members or shareholders also used to get dividends on their shares, because East India Company was a major player in India. That made huge changes, right? Because understand why railways were being built. Were they built for Indians? Now, this question was asked by Gopal Krishna Gokhale. This question was asked by G. Subramaniam Iyer, the founder of the Hindu paper out there. It was asked by even Dadabhai Naoroji. And the answer was that look, we do need industrialization. India did need railways, but it needed on its own capital and not foreign capital, because we were paying huge interest to the Britishers. On top of that, I'm asking you, dear students, is there any reason that why the first railways of India in 1853 was made between Thane and Mumbai, that is Bombay at that point of time? It was made in the Deccan area. Actually, if you go to see, the first set of railways was not meant for communication or for passenger services. It was not meant for passengers. It was meant to carry truckloads of cotton from hinterland to the ports. See, Bombay was a very important port, and cotton was a major product from Maharashtra at that point of time, Bombay province. The Deccan area, black soil, Regur soil of the Deccan area is the most fertile one as far as cotton crops are considered. And that is why you needed some kind of transportation facilities to carry the raw cotton from hinterland to the ports. And that is why the railways were coming up. It was not coming up to ferry common Indians from Thane to Mumbai. It was coming up to ferry raw materials from Thane to Mumbai. And that is why India said, nationalists said, that we need industrialization, but for our purposes, not for the purposes of Britishers. Lastly, the most important, famous, often quoted, often repeated concept of the drain of wealth. Dadabhai Naoroji wrote a book called Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. Now, in this book, he came up with a concept of why India was in a poor state, why most of the Indians were suffering under poverty, and how there was a drain of wealth. India was being drained, bloodied drain. It's like somebody has cut open a wound on the body and the blood is draining. Dadabhai Naoroji used those words, saying that India has been drained of its blood and its resources also. And those were huge, huge, huge acquisitions. And see, it was not acquisitions such, but for the first time, Britishers were hearing these words from Indians. Till 1860s, it was even hard for Indians to imagine how India was being looted, right? Other than the direct plunder, but now direct plunder didn't happen. So the indirect plunder needed to be showed to the Indians, right? It needed to be exposed. This was like an expose which was happening at that point of time, and Britishers were stunned. But actually, Dadabhai Naoroji was taking these examples from Britishers themselves. There was a member of the Council of the Secretary of State called as Mr. John Strachey, and he wrote and he gave his famous lecture in 1888, in which he explained the drain of wealth. And he says in a very simple way, drain was defined as all the money that went from India for which there was no commensurate return. So let's suppose you are an exporter and somebody is an importer. You export something, right? So let's suppose you export a product, you export tea. You exported tea. You will get something in return, right? You will get money in return. Let's suppose if you don't want money, you will want some product. So let's suppose you are exporting tea, you are getting opium in return. Or you'll get something else in return, let's say sugar in return. Whatever you decide. So, but you should get something in return. Otherwise, the trade is like never having taken place. But Dadabhai Naoroji says that drain is something that money went from India, but we didn't get anything in return from there. Money was being drained from India, but Indians did not get anything out of that. See, Indians, as it is, India was giving away its raw material, which was artificially made cheap, which was the products or the prices of which was artificially kept low. So you were facing a loss on that. Drain is not equal to loss. Drain is total going away of money for which there is no return of anything. Understand that. Let's suppose if my cotton is valued at 100 rupees a kg and I'm getting 20 rupees or 40 rupees. So I'm being made a fool of. That's called loss. Drain is not loss. Drain is something else. Drain is like I'm giving my products for free. That's drain. I'm giving my products, but I'm getting nothing in return. Not a single paisa in return. That is drain. Now, how it was happening? In a very simple way, there was a Secretary of State for India sitting in London. After Government of India Act 1858, there was a Secretary of State who became responsible for matters of Indian affairs. And he had a council of 15 members also. So the Secretary of State for India who was sitting in London, he used to draw bills, he used to write bills or checks in the name of Viceroy. Those checks were encashed in India by Viceroy. Viceroy used to give money to the Secretary of State from the Indian coffers, from the Indian treasury. Now, why Viceroy was giving money to from the Indian treasury to this Secretary of State who was sitting in London? Because of something called as the charges for which he wanted to do so. So, for example, the Secretary of State wanted money for army expenditure. That is, the British Army was fighting for the protection of India. For that, he needed money. So, Viceroy gave him the money. Or the salaries of civil servants. The civil servants who were serving in India, the British origin civil servants, their salaries were also credited in London. So, for that, he needed money. Interest payments on railways, for that, they needed money. You know, all of these were called as home charges. Now, actually speaking, Indians never went and asked for Britishers to fight foreign wars. For example, I just told you in this lecture about Opium Wars. This was fought between East India Company and China. Did Indians say that they want to fight an opium war in 1840s? No. In 1839, Britishers fought the first war with Afghanistan. Did Indians want that war? No. In Burma, the Britishers fought. In Crimea in 1853, the Britishers fought. In all of these wars, Indians were not a party. Of course, Indian soldiers were going on, but these wars were thrust upon India. Indians never willingly participated, or Indians never even wanted to participate. Now, for what protection they were asking money, it's best for Britishers to explain. But Such kind of provisions drained India of its wealth. And the money that went was in huge amount. Now that is what the drain is about. There is a very beautiful line, in fact, an explanation which is given by R.C. Dutt. He says, the taxation raised by a king, says an Indian poet, uh, is like the moisture sucked up by the sun to be returned to the earth as a fertilizing rain. It's like saying that, the sun sucks up the moisture, takes up the moisture, and gives us the rain. It's the conventional form of rain, right? It normally happens in the same area. But remember, drain of wealth was like moisture being sucked or moisture being received from India, but it was actually raining in England, not in India. So, amount and taxations and plunder and looting happening in India, and the benefits going to Britishers. Those beautiful words were given by R.C. Dutt. Now, that is the end of our lectures, but it is also giving rise to the next lecture. That is, how would you end the drain? This question was asked, that how do you end the drain? For the first time, Dadabhai Naoroji gave the example of self-government or Swaraj. He said that the self-government is the only remedy for India's woes and wrongs. In 1906, presiding over as Calcutta President of the Indian National Congress, Dadabhai Naoroji gave that goal of the national movement, that we should have Swaraj or self-government as in the likes of UK. UK has self-government. Other colonies of UK has self-government. So we shall also have it. It led to the starting of the national movement and development of the anti-colonial strategy. This was the beginning. They were the pioneers. Here I've shown you the picture of G. Subramaniam Iyer, who happened to be one of the vocals of economic nationalism and also the founder of Hindu newspaper that you read so dearly. So I hope, my dear students, that you found this lecture very interesting and informative. Again, I would like to remember you or make you remind that we are starting our P2I batches from 11th of August. Don't miss this bus. Don't miss this opportunity. As I said, you will be provided a dedicated mentor. Everyday classes, current affairs, the best available faculties of India will be teaching you. I will be there for your history lectures particularly. And of course, the batch is for prelims to interview. So prelims, mains, which is a mains residential program, and finally the interview section. All of this at the same price with no added cost at any point of time, provided you use the code ASHLive. If you don't use the code ASHLive, you will not get those benefits. Please use the code, avail this opportunity, become a person who sees a dream as well as realizing the dream. See, the end goal is to see your name in the final list, right? Not just clear the prelims and sit at home. Again, wait for the next prelims to come and not perform in the mains. That is not we want. That is not you want. I know that. Particularly use this code ASHLive, realize your dreams, come to us, read with us, hustle with us, struggle with us, work hard. Writing an answer is also a form of, I would say, unrealized potential that you have. You need to chisel it. You need to make it refined, right? So join us. We'll be there with you. It's starting on 11th of August. If you have any questions related to this class or you want the PPTs of this class, use this code, join to me on the Telegram channel, right? And use it, UPSC History Sheeter with Ashish, right? Use the code, join with me to the Telegram community. We are a huge community out there on Telegram. History related questions, any kind of questions. If you have any query regarding optionals or in general, any kind of UPSC related queries, be more than confident of reaching me out. Thank you for watching this episode. Wait for the next one. It's more interesting. Thank you.